Hello all, happy Tuesday. I wasn't originally going to do a video on this, but it's continuing. So I thought instead of just raw, which is, I admit, this was triggering at first as a big, okay, my wedding ring is Superman. Okay, it's a Superman shield. I freaking love comic books. So Bill Maher took a swipe directly at me in his dumb comments on his blog. And so I am going to challenge his coffee mug merchandise and say, no, Bill Maher, you are wrong. You are not wrong. You are big time wrong here. Because his central thesis is that, one, in this article he wrote on the Real Time with Bill Maher blog, called Adulting. Really short, three paragraphs that pissed off everyone, but including comic book fans. He managed to shit on Stan Lee's legacy, attack adults that read comic books, say they were only for kids, and end it with the line, I don't think it's a huge stretch to suggest that Donald Trump could only get elected in a country that thinks comic books are important. Well, first of all, Bill Maher, on one point, you're wrong that an interest in comic books is a uniquely American thing. Up here in Canada, in Toronto, we have Joe Shuster Way for one of the creators of Superman, because we are quite proud that the Daily Planet was, based on the Toronto Star, the Daily Star at the time. We value our contributions to comic books, but we don't hold a candle to Japan that sees comic books or manga as completely appropriate. I mean, there are comic books written for adults that are seen as completely appropriate things to read on the subway. There's no shame in them. There are comics for kids. There are comics that are for adults. Comics are not seen as just for children in Japan. And on many financial markers, Asia's kicking our ass in whitey land. Not that America's a white country. But the line, I don't think it's a huge stretch to suggest that Donald Trump could only get elected in a country that thinks comic books are important, is such a sign that not only did he clearly not read very many comics as a child, he didn't internalize the messages in things like Spider-Man and X-Men and Black Panther, and really offended the cultural significance of Black Panther alone. I mean, what a way to piss off the entire liberal coalition. Imply that reading comic books, I mean, superheroes, or Stan would say superheroes, are not exclusive to comic books anymore. I don't believe they ever have been. I believe that comic books are a throwback to the storytelling of ancient Greek heroes, Heracles and Perseus and all those guys. They were superheroes. They were superhuman. They did feats of strength for the greater good. There was a little bit of morality tied up in there, but most of the times, yay, he's strong. And we see those myths as great literature, and superheroes, guys like Bill Maher, see as crap. I already talked about what Stan Lee means to me in a previous video, and what his work meant to me, but to summarize it as just comic books, that superheroes and comic books are synonymous. What is it, 1950? I mean, ever since Wonder Woman became a TV show and Spider-Man became a cartoon, you can't say that anymore. There are probably far more people that have watched Wonder Woman on TV or on the big screen have never read a comic book. Same could be said for Thor, Captain America, Black Panther. Though a lot of people in my old hood read comics just because they were cheap and they were available at the library. That's between that and the outhouse at my grandmother's cottage, that's how I got into comic books. But it's not about comic books anymore. And it's not just the raw consumerism of, oh, he got people to see a movie, as Bill Maher so smugly. And I mean, let's face it, Bill Maher has the market cornered on smug. I mean, he tailors his appearance to look smug. I mean, if this isn't the poster boy for smug white male liberalism, smug white male entitled liberalism, I don't know what is. He's practically like the supervillain of liberalism, a terminology he doesn't understand because he claims not to read comic books. Bull. I have a hard time believing that he has not seen a movie involving a superhero the whole time they've been out. BS. I don't buy that. If he has, he's doing it to make a point. You're a loser, Bill Maher, if you haven't seen North Shakespeare, aka Thor, a 2-hour Steve McQueen homage, aka the original Captain America, or the subversive mainstreaming of for us, by us, black cinema that was Black Panther. Black Panther was a mass media cultural revolution. Some of the things they put in that movie, and to someone who doesn't understand the significance of certain cultural traditions among Black people, and I know I'm committing a bit of a desecration by even talking about this, but this is what Black Panther did. They talked about it, so I can talk about it based on Black Panther. A lot of those rituals you saw in Black Panther were based on, they're not exact, obviously, but they're based on very real cultural traditions. The use of salt, the metaphorical rebirth, focus on ancestors, all that stuff. Those were elements of the cultures of the countries of origin that people were ripped out of because of the forced migration of the slave trade. And they were told, that's the devil. You don't practice it. They had to practice it in secret or fuse it to Catholicism, where we get like Santeria and Voodoo from. But there are still scattered around practitioners of those old ways, worshippers of the Orisha, which are more like ancestors or superheroes than what we consider as gods. And so to see that on screen, I admit, like, I look whiter than white, but I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and so there were moments where I was like I got why people said it was like going to church. I was like, what is going on? What am I seeing? I got the same feeling watching Luke Cage season 2. And I don't think Luke Cage season 2, I don't think some of the stuff they're doing on Black Lightning this season would have been possible without the massive cultural phenomenon that was Black Panther, and without the revolution in superheroes that Stan Lee oversaw. And Stan Lee did not create Black Panther. I don't believe. That's something that's been reported incorrectly. But without Stan Lee, there would be no Black Panther. He didn't create Captain America, but he kept characters like Captain America relevant in a way DC Comics really struggled to do with Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman, because they were products of the Golden Age, which was recovering from it started in the interwar period. Superman was 1939. He premiered, so that was, between the First and Second World Wars. Second World War was just sort of getting going. And so Superman and Wonder Woman, they were intimately connected to the idea of the war effort. That's why the Wonder Woman movie was so brilliant. And I think they moved into the First World War because, Captain America did the Second World War. And Captain America's obviously, part of that tradition. Those were the golden age superheroes. Batman was an offshoot of crime comics. But the Silver Age is wrapped up in the civil rights movement just as intrinsically as the golden age was connected to the war effort. And so that's why I focused on that last line that Bill Maher so cruelly dug at fans of comic books, that I don't think it's a huge stretch to suggest that Donald Trump could only get elected in a country that thinks comic books are important. You can tell he's not LGBTQ or a person of color or anyone else who was kept out of elitist art and saw their first role models in junk culture. I mean, that's the way it tends to work, right? Just look at the history of music, like the idea of a crossover act of black performers that white people, they were seen respectable enough to listen to. Junk culture is the springboard for the disenfranchised to tell their stories. And Bill Maher, it's just a Ivy League, insufferable, selfish piece of crap. And I don't normally talk that rough about someone, but the fact he shows such complete ignorance of how comics have benefited people, what those Silver Age comics did, they instilled a generation with liberal values of tolerance and enjoyment of diversity in a way that I don't think any other medium has. And that's spread off into, the social commentary that's going on in a lot of these shows. Legends of Tomorrow does it in a really fun, subtle way. The last episode I saw, there was a fantasy chick with a third boob in it. It was awesome. But they also, deal with parts of history and they had the creator of Kaiju Monsters in one episode. They had J.R.R. Tolkien in another. It's cool. It's like the new Quantum Leap with an ensemble cast, but it's incredibly diverse and super fun. And it just sort of like, hey, these are all people and they're all kind of misfits. And I mean, that's right up Stanley's alley. But then you get the much preachier stuff, like the refugee metaphor that Supergirl is just beating us over the head with this season. I'm having trouble dealing with it. It's so, but it's made for teenagers. It's made for teenagers, and teenagers love that preachy crap. And unlike Bill Maher, I'm not going to say, oh, it's junk and it's making them stupid. No, this is at their level. If they enjoy this, awesome. You got to get people where they are. You got to talk at them, not down to them. And only a guy who only has a career because he has rich, powerful friends in media that will create workfare programs for him, no matter how badly he fucks up, could equate comic books in the election of Donald Trump. I think guys like Bill Maher, who are just insufferable in their trapped in amber 1970s bordering on 1980s form of non-intersexual, very white liberalism, I think they did a lot more to drive people towards voting for Trump than comic books ever did. And I know this is way harsher than I normally would be, but I really stand by this. I don't think people should be judged just because they're white. I don't think people should be judged just because they're liberal, whiter than a ghost. I don't think it's about that. It's about the insufferable form of hypocritical. Bill Maher got where he got because of his relationships with rich and powerful friends that he went to Ivy League schools with, and they got into production jobs. They're the guys that get stuff made, and he's their friend. It's nepotism, it's cronyism, it's all the things that lifted up Donald Trump as well. And he's blaming comic books? Sorry, Bill Maher, the system that you benefit from is far more directly connected to the rise of Trump than comic books are. Comic books were a lifeline for gay kids who saw in the X-Men, who had to hide their powers, who passed as normal, but had this secret. Secret identities really spoke to the gay kids, the LGBT, before we called them LGBTQ+, of the 90s. I really connected with that. I mean, Beast, the character of Beast, was a freaking light in the darkness for me sometimes, because here was a guy who liked to read and use big words, but he was a blue furry, and being a redheaded kid in the neighborhood I grew up in, you might as well have had blue fur all over your body. I was constantly told by members of a mega church by me that I had spotted skin, therefore I bore the mark of Satan. Like, people just came up to me and told me that stuff. So I really identified with Beast, because not only was he visibly different, he was somebody who couldn't pass. Now I pass all the time in a lot of different ways. Oh, how life changes. But he couldn't pass, but also he could have just been a beast and use his raw physical strength to overpower people and bully people and make people fear him. But he was gentle and well-read, and he was a healer. He was a doctor, right? And that was somebody I could model myself after and see a nobility in pacifism instead of seeing it as weak. And I think that kept me out of a lot of trouble. It kept me from using my fists instead of my words. Because when I was a little bit younger, it was about the time I got into X-Men that I was just starting to get into fights with kids who were much bigger and stronger than me, and it never ended up well for me. I was more like Wolverine. You know how Wolverine in X-Men comics, he's always like, raw, he's the first guy in, and the Sentinel goes, boom, and Wolverine's down, and then he gets back up. He was the first one in and the first one to go down, but then he got back up again because he had a healing factor. And, I found Wolverine kind of scary and violent and rough, whereas Beast was gentle and kind. And I connected with him, and the voice actor in the X-Men cartoon in the 90s was just great. But I mean, those were the role models I got from comic books that, let's face it, I wasn't finding those in classic literature. Everybody's like, oh, you're just like Anne of Green Gables. And it's like, yeah, she broke a slate over one boy's head, and oh no, but he was the right one for her. Every redheaded kid hates three characters, and then you come to appreciate them more as adulthood. But growing up, it was a hatred of Little Orphan Annie, Pippi Longstocking, and Anne of Green Gables. Because everybody's like, you're just like, shut up now. And then I looked like Beast. See? Anne of Green Gables gave me Beast-faced. But Beast was a role model I was able to choose for myself, somebody I could choose to identify with. I saw more of myself because it wasn't forced on me. It wasn't forced on me based on physical appearance. It was based on how I felt inside. And that was really powerful for me. And it was something that adults, because it wasn't great literature, nobody was telling me what to think about comic books. I could decide that for myself. And that kind of free thinking, I think, has been extremely important to me going forward. Comic books was also a medium for the masses, much like the Penny Dreadfuls before them. They were a cheap form of entertainment for increasingly literate younger workforces. So the Penny Dreadfuls were for young men who were working in factories and mines and things like that, because they were the first generation of the working class that could read, thanks to public education. Comic books, these cheap, crappy forms of entertainment, are really tied to social progress. And, growing up in a predominantly Black neighborhood the way I did, I saw the affinity that Black youth had for Superman. The X-Men as well, but Superman. And that, from an identity politics perspective, doesn't make any sense. But from the sense of, here was a guy that protected the weak because he was strong, right? Black Panther wasn't in the cultural awareness in the 1990s the way Superman was, because before Batman, he was like the character that had a movie, right? As of, was it 79, I think? The Chris Reeves film came out. And so, this was a good guy who did good things for people, but he wasn't rich. He wasn't conventionally, socially powerful. He was an everyman who went after rich, arrogant types like Bill Maher. I mean, Lex Luthor. You see where I'm going with this? Comic books make a guy like Trump out to be the bad guy. The businessman is usually the bad guy in superhero comics, other than, Bruce Wayne, and that's a complicated one. Batman slides more into anti-hero territory. But, I mean, Green Goblin and he's a big tech business owner as well. Villain, right? It's the little guy. It's the everyman who is the hero in superhero comics, not a rich asshole like Donald Trump. And the rise of Trump is a complex, fascinating thing. And if you voted for Trump, please don't feel attacked. I'm not attacking you. I think the obsession of this is why people voted for Trump is cheapening the discourse to the point that it is foolish. By announcing that everyone else is dumb, Bill Maher showed himself to be a myopic idiot who uses big words because he was privileged to have a top-notch education. And he doubled it up. He doubled down on it after POW Media, which was Stanley's company that I had the privilege to be able to visit while he was still alive years ago. Bill Maher responds in where was it? The Larry King Now. Well, that's a great way to get your message across to the youth of today. But he said he didn't mean to take a swipe at Stan Lee, which is why you made these comments right after the guy died, asshole. But he says, I am agnostic on Stan Lee. I don't read comic books. I didn't even read them when I was a child. That's a direct contradiction from what he said over here. He said, where is it? Now, I have nothing against comic books. I read them now and then when I was a kid. I read them now and then when I was a kid, and I was all out of Hardy Boys. Okay, so Bill Maher has already been caught in one lie. He said there, he read comic books now and then. Now he says, I didn't even read them when I was a child. This is a guy who's backpedaling and trying to save his own ass. Looks good on you, fucker. What I was saying is, a culture that thinks that comic books and comic book movies are profound meditations on the human condition is a dumb fucking culture. And for people to get mad at that just proves my point. I made people mad, so I'm right. That sounds a lot like Donald Trump. See what I did there? Yeah, I think guys like Bill Maher, grow up and get a job and stop with these kids stuff. That's the sort of bully identifying as a real leftist. None of these dumb fucking leftists, but real. Sorry, Bill Maher, you are part of the stupid left. Because the stupid left doesn't know how to have fun. And people see comic books as deep meditations on the human condition precisely because they are fun. And when you have fun, when you don't have fun, you have nothing. And that, again, that is the perspective of the lower classes, of the working classes, of, that's why Black church goes on for hours and hours and hours, because it's this triumphant celebration for a few hours a week when the rest of their life was hard. And that's soul, right? That's soul. That's why it's soul food. That's why it's soul music. It's soul. It feeds the soul as well as the body. Soul food isn't actually even very good for you, but it tastes really good and it makes you feel good. And that's the point. If you're not feeling good, you don't have anything. That is a deep meditation on the human condition. Knowing how to feel good when your life sucks. An entitled asshole like Bill Maher has no idea what needing that is like. So I'm going to leave that there. That was a lot longer than I intended, but thanks for watching.